We're excited to be here today. We've been working together for over a decade and married for nearly as long, but we've never given a talk together. So this is the first of hopefully many.
Or maybe the last.
So Kevin was actually, Kevin asked us to do a talk on IoT. So that's definitely one part of the talk we're giving today, the Internet of Things. But what we really wanted to look at are some of the big shifts that are disrupting the businesses we're working with, the audiences we're working with, and that we're really working in an exciting time where things that haven't been able to be connected before are. And I think the only constant right now is change itself. And that can be daunting, but what we're going to be sharing today are some new materials and models that actually free up the canvas that we're working on and working with. I think there was a time, even like 5 years ago, where everything we did was kind of confined to a browser. And now our whole palette and canvas has opened up. So we really think that this is actually the best time ever to be a creative. And with that comes responsibility. The things that you'll see today is a layer of intelligence on services and products. And we've been talking a lot about just because you can connect things and add internet and intelligence to objects doesn't necessarily mean that everything needs to be connected or smart. So on the one hand, you have this ability to add life and bring intelligence to the things around us. But I think what's most important about the talk today is the role that we play as creators and inventors today. We actually have a lot of potential to make choices that use those things to change the world or make it better. And I love this quote by Bruce Mau. Now that we can do anything, what will we do? What technology enables now with processing power, devices, sensors, the possibilities are limitless and endless. And so more than ever, we have to make decisions. What will we make and what won't we make?
Cool. So Chloe mentioned that the canvas is wide open these days in terms of what creatives can actually make. She talked about 5 years ago when we created digital experiences, they lived pretty much specifically just inside the desktop browser. And that's really changed very quickly in the last 2 years. And there's been a tremendous amount of activity out there. Of course, there's a number of shifts. We've been living through this shift the last 5, 6, 7 years. Mobile obviously has really transformed everything. And, when I like to think about mobile, and we talk about mobile a lot, my belief is that it's the best version of the internet right now. When you think about these experiences that you create that connect to the internet, the experiences that you create on your phone far outpace what you're able to deliver through the desktop browser. The fact that you have access to GPS, the accelerometer, the camera, all these different types of native technologies that are on the phone, you just don't have that through the desktop browser. So I like to say that mobile is the best version of the internet right now. And then of course the second shift, we've been living through this for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Social has really transformed people's relationships with the internet. Essentially, the control over what gets published and how these experiences get pushed out into the world, consumers have so much control over it. And at the same time, the internet has become less about a single destination and more about creating these distributed commerce experiences, content experiences that basically get spread out across all these different environments. So, I was looking at a report the other day where they talked about how messaging apps have surpassed social networks. Right? And what that is essentially doing is, we're starting to see people create services, bots, and apps inside these messaging apps. Right? So this is a great article that came out yesterday from Andreessen Horowitz, where they talked about WeChat. WeChat is basically an app with apps. So if you think about the number of apps that live inside WeChat, there's probably about, I think the number that they quoted in the article was there are 10 million apps, lightweight apps that live inside WeChat. So if you think about that, that's really transforming our relationship with the internet, our relationship with social, but then also how brands and creatives have to tackle what they're going to create for this new exciting digital landscape. And then, of course, the third shift is data science and artificial intelligence. There are a lot of these artificial intelligence platforms being introduced into the world. IBM Watson, Google DeepMind. And this is really giving creatives and brands the opportunity to create experiences that become much more optimized, much more personalized, and experiences that actually get generated by algorithm as opposed to humans. Right? And we're starting to see how artificial intelligence and bots are driving some of these commerce experiences. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with these commerce experiences like Operator and Magic, where you basically have a text-based conversation, and the way you're interacting with these services is through some type of artificial intelligence layer. And then, of course, we have experiments happening, like the North Face just recently partnered with IBM Watson. So they created a personalized shopping environment that's powered by IBM Watson. So that third shift is really interesting, AI and data intelligence. The fourth shift, which we've been working very closely on over the last 2 years and is pretty much the basis for this presentation, is that the internet has moved off of the screen. Right? So if you look at all these physical objects on this slide, these are all physical objects that we've worked on at RGA over the last 2.5 years. They're all connected devices. They all connect into the internet. There's a layer of intelligence in these physical objects, and they impact how people interact with the internet. Right? So this is a bicycle navigation system. This is a system that allows you to grow vegetables in your house through an appliance, and you're basically controlling the actual appliance through your phone. This is a connected baby sock, so you put the sock on your baby, it measures your baby's blood pressure and heart rate. So the internet has basically scattered across these physical objects. So if you think about these four shifts, mobile, social, we've lived through these shifts over the last couple years. The two new shifts are data science and artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things. You think about the intersections between these four shifts, it's amazing what the canvas is for you young creatives in the audience, where you're potentially able to create, what brands are able to create, far exceeds what I was doing when I was a day-to-day designer several years ago.
So what Richard is talking about are four shifts that really set up the landscape of where we're working today. And we like to call it the Wild West. We think it's an exciting time of invention. And we're looking at new interaction models. When Richard said that the internet has gone off the browser and is surrounding devices, a lot of these devices don't even have screens or interfaces. So essentially, as designers and creators, we're creating experiences between a brand or a product and a person through voice, through sensing, through touch, through a lot of things that go beyond any specific UI elements or design. So it's an interesting time to think about designing a total customer experience when you have to think a lot more about space, movement, and how things are connecting to each other. In terms of new business models, some of the disruptions happening have created whole new categories. If you look at what Airbnb has done for sharing space and excess inventory in real estate, what Uber is now doing and Lyft with car sharing, these disruptions don't just disrupt the categories they're in, they actually create whole new businesses and whole new models for people to interact with one another. And then in terms of new communication models, we live this every day as people that work in agencies and studios and with brands. We're just wrapping our heads around all the possibilities that intelligence and data mean for the messages, stories, and experiences we're sharing with customers. And of course, what we'll be showing today is a lot of smart products. So it's an exciting time. This Wild West really means that nothing's been settled. But what we do see happening is that the companies that are winning are doing a couple things really well. And essentially what they're doing is putting their customer at the center and just removing pain points from the experiences that their customers have through great design. So, companies that have been very successful, have been growing through vertical or horizontal integration in supply chains for decades, are suddenly being disrupted by a startup that just has a really great design-led team and understands how to design around people and be more human. So simplicity is actually helping companies win today. And it's interesting, we don't necessarily, a lot of these are timeless behaviors, but just very timely manifestations of better experiences. You could look at any of these companies that are disrupting their categories. You know, we've always dated, but we maybe used to go to bars and now we can go to Tinder. We've always, you know, created houses or looked for houses, and now you have these apps like Trulia. You could always try to get health insurance or through your company, but now you have Oscar that's simplifying that whole interface. So everything here is a disruption, but what's even more interesting now is that even these disruptors are getting disrupted. So Instacart was making it easier to get groceries, but FreshDirect just launched a sister service called FoodKick. And FoodKick is faster and easier to use than Instacart. So Instacart is suddenly irrelevant, and it's all changing very fast and kind of hard to keep up with. And what we see in terms of how customers are responding is really interesting, because two of the key things that these things all have in common are immediacy, simplicity of interface, and responsiveness. So these companies are delivering a level of customer service unlike anything before. So as a group of people, our expectations when we interact with companies and brands is now getting higher and higher by the day. And we call this expectation service transference, because if I had a really great experience using Uber, I'm going to expect the same thing from my dentist or my bank or my lawyer. And so there's a frustration now when people have this kind of great experience with these brands when it falls off or when it doesn't happen. So this is important to keep in mind. So consumers already have an expectation around a level of service. And as smart products and IoT takes hold, we're going to start to see customers having the same expectation from everyday objects around them. So there'll be an expectation for their car to be smart, for their home to be smart, for the shades in their house to go up and down when the light changes, for the lights in the house to change when it gets dark. And they'll start to say things like, if my car is smart and my refrigerator is smart, why isn't my toothbrush smart? Why aren't my shoes smart? And so it's interesting to start to think about, are consumers actually pushing us to invent better experiences all around? So now more than ever, we're seeing that brands have to behave like startups, and I think our clients are seeing this as well. And the way that they're reacting to this reality takes lots of different shapes. One of the things we're seeing them do, brands do, is create their own accelerators and incubators in-house. Sometimes they'll hire a head of venture that actually goes out and finds small startups that brand can buy, because the brands are often having a hard time moving as fast as they need to. So they'll add an arm of startups or interesting new companies that can actually act as an accelerator for their growth. So there's a lot of interesting ways that brands are acting and reacting to what's happening right now. And the brands that will win are the ones that are very curious, very resilient, and very open to this change that's happening.
Great. So we talked about the shifts. A lot of amazing shifts happening, and the shifts are opening up the opportunities for us to create some really exciting stuff. The landscape looks robust and exciting as well. But the challenge right now is, this is a term that was coined by, I think, the CEO of IKEA. He talked about how the Western world just has too much stuff. We've kind of reached a point where there's peak stuff. And when I heard that phrase, I started thinking about what we do as professionals, right? Especially within this connected object landscape, right? There's just a lot out there, right? So if you think about the apps that live within the App Store, the Google Play Store, 1.6 million, 1.5 million, that's a lot of apps, right? So
when we only use 5, I think the average is what, 5 apps a day?
Yeah. So
Sorry.
Chloe jumped ahead. So basically, if you look at the numbers, pretty much most of our time is spent on the same 5 apps every day. So if you think about it from a consumer standpoint, even from a creative standpoint as well, when we talk to our clients want us to work with them to create some type of service or product. How do we cut through the clutter of the 1.6 million apps, 1.5 million apps, and actually position our product or service in a way where people actually use it on a day-to-day basis? So we've actually hit a point where there is a little bit of this peak stuff happening within the application world, because we could create anything these days. Then also you think about the amount of sensors that are available these days, and just like the pricing of the sensors. Sensors are so cheap these days, and you could actually come up with ideas that live across any type of vertical industry that you could imagine, right? So smart rings, smart air conditioners, smart light bulbs, smart scales, smart basketballs. But then you also see stuff like a smart toaster oven. And I don't want to be up here judging whether or not this is something that people would want, but I don't know. Would you want a smart toaster oven that's programmable through your smartphone? Is it something that may not be quite a necessity in our day-to-day lives? So if you start thinking about peak stuff, you apply it to applications, and then you start seeing the number of connected objects being introduced into the world, it's a big challenge. So although the connected age affords us many opportunities to innovate, it also gives us the opportunity to create a lot more clutter and a lot more noise. So it's almost like we have to retreat back to the principles of design and really think about what users need, what they care about, before we even start falling in love with the technology. So the opportunity. Okay, so I saw this online and I thought it was interesting. There was a quote in some Ad Age article that I read that said, "Any device with a screen allows for an interesting opportunity. Given the limited display size of these watches, the ads will need to be smaller than on the smartphones, and they could briefly take over the small screens to show promotions or coupons." So when I saw this, I was ready to quit my job and go work on a farm, because this is not the answer for connected objects. I think whenever there's a new connected object that hits the marketplace,
you would never go work on a farm.
Maybe.
A connected farm.
So anyway, I think whenever there's a new object that's introduced into the marketplace, a new screen, I think the industry sometimes gravitates towards, hey, how do we actually monetize it? How do we push more offers, deals, and ad units? And I don't believe that's the actual right approach. I think a lot of us in this room probably don't believe it's the right approach as well. For us, our belief is, hey, think product, service, and data first. Without the product being useful, without the service being useful, without some insight coming out of the data, there is no advertising. So you have to really nail the product and service first before you even think about the marketing/advertising opportunity. So we have to put the humans at the center of our design process. We have to go through our standard design process of design research. We have to figure out what their needs are, what their behaviors are, and create things that people want, create things that add value to the world, right? So if you think about that slide where you just had a lot of these different connected objects, you could probably go through that slide and cross off things that people probably would never want to use in their day-to-day lives. So when we think about connected objects, a lot of people, when they think about IoT and connected objects, they think about the gadgets, right? The actual hardware that you put on your wrist, the actual light bulb. But from our standpoint, IoT typically has this triple layer stack, right? It's the hardware, the software, and then the data. I think sometimes people overlook the data, but the data in our minds is probably one of the most important things to think about when you think about connected objects. And Chloe's going to get into that in a little bit. So what I wanted to do is show you guys 2 case studies of products that we've worked on inside the agency that kind of address that triple stack of hardware, software, and data. So the first one is BioRanger. This is actually it's more of an industrial IoT product that we created for farmers, right? So
this was with the RGA Accelerator, where our agency partners with startups to help them evolve their idea with design for the customer and help launch it.
Yeah. Can you actually jack up the volume a little bit? Yeah.
Our food supply is under attack. And the amazing thing is, farmers are still detecting and fighting these pests and diseases the same way they did 50 years ago. They literally walk the fields looking for physical signs of disease, then mail away samples to a lab that takes 5 days for results, all while the disease can be spreading. It's no wonder that there are $75 billion in lost crops a year. This is why we created the BioRanger. BioRanger is a handheld biology lab. It's a breakthrough DNA system, replacing the 5-day mail-away process with immediate results. Here's how it works. A food or water sample gets placed in the BioRanger. The DNA is immediately extracted and the test is run. The app allows the farmer to watch the test in real time, and in 20 minutes, they know the result. No waiting for physical symptoms to appear. No waiting for the lab to call in 5 days. And most importantly, no disease spreading. But where it really gets useful is the app then sends the data to the cloud, where it's recorded and summarized. It's then compared to weather and other test data from neighboring farms, so it can help manage the movement of the disease. For the first time in the history of farming, farmers have a tool that allows them to be proactive to diseases instead of reactive. We've also launched a marketplace so that every food scientist and researcher can sell their customized test kits, created using BioRanger's open API. Already, BioRanger is protecting more than 250 million acres of crops in South America's orange groves, in rural China, and on family farms in Iowa. And it's making food safer at your local grocery store and restaurants. This is BioRanger.
So this is a startup that we work with where we actually help them with their hardware, some of the industrial design around the hardware, but then we also designed out their software platform. But the value of the platform really comes from how you actually analyze the data. So part of what we talked about when we were working on the actual interface was like, how do we actually eventually take that data and package it in a way where it's very useful to potentially insurance companies. So if you're an insurance company and you're insuring farms, to be able to get data around like whether or not there's a potential pathogen outbreak within the Florida citrus crops, the insurance company would love to have that data, right? If all this data is being uploaded into the cloud, that's a business opportunity for BioRanger to potentially sell that data off to insurance companies. But then also, if you're a commodities trader, you trade oranges, to be able to know whether or not certain crops are clean from a soil standpoint, I think that's great data to potentially repackage. So when we think about connected objects and IoT, the data is probably one of the more important layers that always gets overlooked. I think when people think about IoT and connected objects, they always quickly gravitate to the sexy hardware and the sexy software. But the data is something that we have to really take a pause and think about, and there's a lot of creative opportunities there. Okay, so the second case study is Owlet. So I talked about this before, connected baby sock. Basically, these guys, the founders, they were basically parents of newborns. They came into our program. They said, hey, we have this prototype of a sock. We put it onto the baby's foot. It uses this technology called post oximetry, which is basically similar to like when you go to a hospital, you put on the blood pressure reader, and it shoots like infrared through your finger. So they had a version of that technology that would basically get embedded into this connected sock. And basically the sock would measure blood pressure, body temperature, and it also had a 3-axis accelerometer, so if the baby flipped over in his or her sleep, the actual sock would notify your phone. So if you're a parent of a newborn and you're scared of your kid flipping over because of sudden infant death syndrome, having this sock on your baby when he or she's sleeping, it's peace of mind. And I was at the point in my life when we were working with these guys, we had was like a 5-year-old, so I just went through that whole process of being paranoid that if my baby flipped over during the middle of the night, that he or she might not be breathing. So having this sock was just a really nice product to be available for parents.
Is the baby sleeping peacefully? Or is something wrong? It's a question every new parent can relate to. That's why we created the Owlet Smart Sock. Start by telling us a little basic information about your baby in his profile. When you slip on the Owlet Smart Sock, it silently checks on him while he sleeps. You can see all you need to see right on your phone, no matter where you are. Owlet alerts you only if there seems to be a problem with your baby's heart rate or oxygen levels. It uses a proven safe technology called pulse oximetry that doctors and nurses have used for decades. And Owlet's base station can alert you even if your Wi-Fi and cell service go down. It's all about giving you a little more rest and a little less to worry about, because that's a pretty big deal. This is Owlet.
Yeah, so this product is available right now, so if anyone wants to go and buy it, it's available online. One interesting thing that came out of this work was, I keep going back to the opportunity with data. When we were working with this team, they said, hey, eventually if there's 300,000 of these socks scattered across the New York City tri-state area, and they're calculating data and capturing data in the cloud, they potentially could start predicting whether or not there's an outbreak of flu within certain age groups or certain regions of the tri-state area. And that same type of thinking could apply to other parts of the world. So when you have a connected object that eventually gets to the point where you have a critical mass from a community size standpoint, there's so many interesting things that you can do with the data. Which leads us into the next section.
So we actually think out of the hardware, the software, and the data, that the data is actually the place that the people here in the room can probably have the most fun playing. And usually we think about data as an endpoint or an output from the work we do. But what if we actually flip that and started to look at the data coming off of these intelligent services and products as the brief, as the material that we create with or invent with? And we'll just, as an exercise, kind of show you some projects where this was the starting point, and then talk about possibilities with some others that are coming out. So with Equinox, we just showed you some work from the RGA Accelerator. This was actually a project where we realized with our partner Equinox that you could actually put sensors in cycles, indoor cycling bikes, and that there would be data coming off of these bikes. And it was really a question, okay, what could we do with this? And the idea was that you could create a whole experience from the data coming off of these bikes to help people stay motivated and have a better time when they're in an indoor cycling class. And this is a time when Equinox was facing very stiff competition from brands like SoulCycle and Flywheel. So our team actually set up a prototype studio where we had the bikes, and our programmers and creatives were working together to actually shape the data into games. This is a console that the teachers use to design different games so that every class is different. And you start to see the data goes onto the walls, but it also comes back to the person through their mobile device, so they can actually see over time what their performance is like, and it encourages them with each class to both participate in the games and have accountability, but also to push themselves as they take additional classes. Let's look at the work.
For a very long period of time, riders have been going into a dark room on a bike with one wheel, going nowhere. They weren't keeping track of their performance, and the experience was always the same. This is what led Equinox to the pursuit. The Pursuit is the world's best connected studio cycling experience that tracks every moment, pits rider against rider, team against team, and motivates people by seeing their data in real time. The Pursuit consists of 3 parts. There's the instructor console, which tracks the progress of every rider, the immersive widescreen experience, and a second screen experience that lives on a rider's phone. Your every move is animated on screen, with performance-based games created with exercise science-driven data. Games like Avalanche, Tour de Force, and Fire Up were designed on top of this data for the ultimate workout. The digital experience actually pumps you to do more physically. You're actually working harder because you want to see your results up on the screen, and you want to see your team win. To create this innovative experience, it required a new type of team and a new way of working. Our data scientists, coders, and experienced designers created a studio where we prototyped on connected bikes, and the real-time data generated from these bikes informed the design. The Pursuit will completely change the way you think about connected fitness. The Pursuit is functional, beautiful, based on exercise science, and it makes you work harder than you've ever worked before. This is The Pursuit by Equinox.
And what Richard was saying about scale is interesting. This was data used for design experience, not just for one person, but a whole class of people. And this is a product that we did through the RGA Accelerator Hammerhead, where you have the physical hardware was inspired by planes landing. They hold up these blinking lights. And the team found this need among the cycling community that when they're actually cycling and get lost or need to know where to go, they were reaching for their phones, and it's actually really dangerous. So Hammerhead sits on the front of your bike, but it connects and speaks to your phone, so it gives you directions and wayfinding as you're riding. So it basically lights up and lets you know if you have to go left or right or straight ahead. And these are just some sketches of the experience that we help them design. And to Richard's point, I think the fourth area, once you think about the hardware, the software, and data, it's really that community or scale. So once you have all this data from these cyclists, that can start to feed governments or urban planners, help them figure out where people are cycling or where we need to add new cycling routes in the places that we live. This, how many people here have an Alexa in their house? One so far. It's actually, out of all the things that we're talking about today, it's something that you can buy and start to play with and immediately see for yourselves where this is all heading. So we just, for those of you in the room who came in later, you missed the gossip, which is that Richard and I are actually, we're speaking together, but we're also married. And so we recently bought an Alexa for our family, and so she sits in the living room. And it's been amazingly interesting to see how our family is reacting to this connected product. So our 3-year-old, who doesn't read or write yet, is learning how to use commands to search on Alexa. So she could never go to Google and put in a query. But she knows now how to get around the internet to find music she likes. She's now controlling the music in her house. Alexa is telling jokes. In fact, our 3-year-old made Alexa angry the other day, and Alexa turned bright red and stopped talking. And our 3-year-old got really upset and came to me and said, "Alexa's angry, like help me with this." But it's very empowering to her, and we've been talking about that. That's amazing. What about the elderly, people that aren't comfortable with digital interfaces or UI, that kind of miss the boat there? What could they do to actually use voice to bring things that they need? You can shop through this product. Obviously, that's probably Amazon's ultimate goal, but it's learning. And I think the interesting thing we haven't discussed too much is that these products are actually going to be listening to us more. So the algorithms get smarter as they hear the way we're using them. So there's an Alexa feed that you can go see like how people are actually talking to her. And it's a huge amount of information for a company like Amazon or other companies to know how what a family's thinking about or talking about on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, that can lead to product recommendations, but it can lead to really useful applications as well. The design of this is also really interesting. So Richard and I, our background is both in experience design, and we spent years, as many of you in the room, kind of crafting the art of the digital interface and how to create interfaces that are very simple and usable and beautiful. There's no digital interface here. The only interface is the interaction or command comes from the user, your voice and her voice responding. But what's beautiful is that it's all through this very seamless design with light. So when you say Alexa, the little light blue light comes to the person who's talking to her. So 4 people could be in the room, but she reacts to the person who commands Alexa. The light comes to you, and then that's how you know that she's ready to engage. So there's all these simple design cues that designers now have to think about, which go beyond the interface and go into sound design, motion design, design of space, and other areas. This is an interesting product that we think is the pet world is interesting. A lot of us work with consumer packaged goods. This is tracking a pet's location. There's also trackers now for pets' activity levels. And when, I think in the one show, there was a project where a company was actually working with a pet food brand to deliver recommendations of amounts of food or types of food based on how that pet was exercising. So that's another way that the data can be used to make a better product or brand experience. This is the beginning of smart coffee machines. This one, you can use your mobile device to program coffee in the morning, but it gets much more interesting when it starts to understand your coffee preferences, how much milk you want, how much foam, how much coffee. When your coffee is low, what new coffees you might like. The possibilities get interesting there. And one of the best players that we'll see in this emerging field of connected experiences, the leader, one of them is really Disney. And for any of you who have been to the Magic Kingdom and tried out the Magic Bracelet, it just creates this very seamless way of moving through the Disney experience. but Disney's also learning about how people are moving through the experience so that they can make it better. And Verizon is one of our clients, and they have this interesting technology that you can actually put in any car that has a on-dashboard port, something like, okay. Anyway, so you can put it in and it starts to track how you're driving, the health of your car. And going back to the insurance example Richard was talking about earlier, this is a really interesting thing that someone like Geico could take advantage of, looking at how people are driving, how safe they're driving, how fast they're driving, and actually give people credit or recognition for driving well. One more project that we wanted to bring up is the interesting opportunity isn't just from brands to consumers, it's also from brands to brands. So a lot of these disruptors are helping deliver, disruptive companies like Amazon are delivering products really fast, but we don't always think about the people that are in the warehouses lifting all these products that have to get to us. So this was a RGA accelerator project called Kinetic that we're going to look at.
In U.S. warehouses, a workplace injury to just one employee can cost a company up to $200,000, requiring an additional $2.5 million in revenue to offset a single back injury. Introducing Kinetic, wearable devices designed to protect workers. A wristband and back brace that automatically detect when a worker is performing a lift. Once a lift happens, we analyze the biomechanics of that lift, and then it gets classified as a low-risk or high-risk lift. Every time workers perform high-risk lifts, notifications encourage them to correct their posture, keeping them safe and healthy. Managers also get feedback too. They can see individual risk profiles of their workers, as well as receive warnings when fatigue is setting in. The manager then gets actionable insights on how they can reduce the risk of injuries. Kinetic is bringing preventive care to the warehouse, innovating how workers stay healthy, as well as how they're managed. Today, Kinetic is working with some of the largest shippers in the world to build the first ever data center of human activity in relation to productivity. This has led to insurance companies recommending Kinetic in exchange for lower premiums. This is Kinetic, on a mission to protect workers everywhere.
It's not the sexiest work, but it's saving a lot of people's back from serious injury, which we love. So just circling back to the beginning, we've talked about the shifts happening in the landscape. We've talked about the incredible freedom that technology has allowed and how it's a very exciting time to create. And what we want to leave you with is this thought, is that when everything can be connected, what should we create? And maybe more importantly, what should we not create? Thank you.